All right. Welcome, everyone. This is Our Travel Experiences. I'm Kyle Rasmussen, and today I got a good friend with me, Adrian. Adrian, how's it going?
Good, Kyle. How's it going, man?
Good, good. I'm excited to talk about your travel experiences today. I know you were talking about your time in Paris, and so I'm really excited to hear about that and all the great things that you did over there.
Yeah. Oh man. No, it was good. Um, yeah, Paris is a pretty fun place. You've been there, I think, right? You've gone there a few times.
Yeah, I went there. I went there a few years ago. I think that was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, such a cool city. I mean, you could spend a lot of time there, and there's so much to do. It's one of the most iconic cities in the world.
Yeah. Well, and that's what it was pretty interesting because I was in Paris, fresh out of high school. I was an Idaho boy. I lived in like central Idaho in a little tiny town called McCall, Idaho. Uh,
Hmm.
and Just to give you like a frame of reference, like the population of my town is like 2,000 people, you know. Um,
Yeah.
and to me, I was like, man, this place is getting crowded. But yeah, I spent my entire life living in Idaho, and I just wanted to get out so bad. I
Hmm.
lived in the same house. I almost lived in the same bedroom my entire life. Like it was, um, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do after high school. I remember all the people who were coming to my high school doing all the college fairs and crap like that, you know.
Hmm.
And I wasn't really ready to go to college. As honestly, actually, I had no idea what the hell I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah.
But I really liked cooking, and I cooked a lot with my mom. And a little backstory is that you know this, I think, is that I'm French,
Hmm.
and I grew up with my mom who was born and raised in France, and so um, one day my mom was like, "Well, you should go to like a cooking school or something," and I was like, "Yeah, that would be cool. That's not a bad idea." So she was pretty excited for me. So she just started to research like all these cooking schools and stuff like that. And then,
Yeah.
I didn't really have anything to say. I was still like really involved with my senior year and all the crap that I was doing there. And One day she was just like, so there's this cooking school in Paris, and if you want, you should totally apply. Um, I can say that I'm very fortunate. I have grandparents that saved money for me for, you know, education after high school. So that wasn't
Hmm.
really a concern. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I just have no idea if I'm going to get in or anything. So without me knowing it, my mom sent in like a resume and everything for me. I mean, and documented some of the stuff that I would cook and whatever. And then she kind of filled me in like after she did that, and then I got like an acceptance letter. So I was like,
Nice.
oh, okay. She's like, you want to do it? And I'm like, yeah, yeah, I guess so. So I know I went off tangent there, but um, it's a cool city. I just remember living there and being in a situation where I went for like a year ago. I was living in small town Idaho. Two stoplights to then like living in Paris. And I remember I come home.
A little bit different there.
Oh yeah, I'd be coming home at night from the bars, and my casual drunken stroll through Paris to go from one side of the town where the bars are to, or some of the bars that I liked, to my apartment was like through the Louvre, and like walking through like
Oh wow.
the like I know, and so I would have to like pinch myself because it's pretty crazy because I'd just be like, I'm walking right past the Louvre, like this is just a normal walk for me home at night,
Hmm.
or like past the Eiffel Tower and things like that, the Champs Elysees. The
Hmm.
Galerie Lafayette, all that cool, all those cool places.
That's so wild.
Yeah.
So how long were you there for?
So I was there for a year. Uh, I had, yeah, exactly a year. So I think I did. Oh no, it was more like 11 months. No, hold up, I can't remember anymore. I'm too old now to remember. It was like, yeah, it was about like 11 and a half months. My schooling started in like the end of October or end of August, and then I was back in the States by July 3rd. I think, yeah,
Okay.
I came back home. I got literally into McCall on July 4th at like 2 in the morning. So, but yeah, the program that I was doing for the school, which the school, by the way, was called Ferendi. I think they've rebranded since I was there. It used to be called Grégoire Ferendi. Now I think it's just Ferendi. And and they had this program where you would go to school for 5 months. It was pretty intense. It was like all day schooling from like 7 in the morning to like 5 o'clock at night.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and then and then after that you do a 6 month internship, and like the internship was part of the schooling. Like you could not get your diploma without completing your internship, and your
Hmm.
internship was basically you getting placed in a restaurant. And the chefs that were like the teachers and stuff, they were kind of the ones responsible with like figuring out what restaurant you were going to go work at. And there was hundreds and hundreds of restaurants that had
Hmm.
like a relationship with this school. So this school's kind of like had like a repertoire of all these different restaurants, different styles, different chefs, different nature of work. So the chefs would kind of
Hmm.
like pick and choose where students would go. So um
Interesting.
yeah, it was really cool though. So
How many people were in the program?
well, if you talk about like the entire school, it's kind of it from what I remember, it's a little it's kind of complicated. So um the school was pretty interesting. Um it had different departments. So it had like a general cuisine department. So for kids learning
Hmm.
cuisine. Then it had like a bakery department. It had a pastries department. It had like a restaurant management department, and then it had like high end waitress, waiter, server department.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I know for like the cuisine and the pastries, they had a French program for French students, and then they had a international program for international students. Um, so you would get like a mix. So the French students, knowing the French, and I can say this because I'm French. The French students got to their classes were on the highest floor of the building. They got all the brand new like cutlery and cookware
Hmm.
and pots and pans and everything.
Yeah.
And then the international program and us, we would get the byproduct. So like once a pot wasn't deemed good enough for the French kids, then it was like a new pot that we got in our department, our class, and we cooked on the lower levels. I don't know.
That's funny.
The French are goofy like that, but yeah, it was a pretty cool school. They had a bakery program for French kids, but then they also had this bakery program for like people had like who had like a troubled past. I think like a lot of like um people who had been incarcerated at some point,
Hmm.
who like were given like an opportunity to like lessen their sentence by going to this school and like interning and like getting involved in like a occupation of that nature. Um, and then the school was pretty cool. The school actually had 2 restaurants inside of it, with 6-month reservation lists. And the restaurants were really rad because how the restaurants operated was that they were ran by the students, and obviously overseen by teachers and stuff. But like the restaurant management group or department, they were responsible for like just like the marketing and everything in between, and the buying of produce and everything of that sort for the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had the bakery kids who were responsible for producing bread for the restaurant, and bakery goods. And then you had the pastry kids who were also responsible for the desserts and the pastries. Then you had the servers who were responsible for like floor design and like the interior design and everything in between to just spruce up the restaurant. And then you had the
Mm-hmm.
2 classes, the 2 international and then the French kids. They were responsible for the cooking. And so the program that I was in, there was uh, of my program, there was 2 classes. They called it Anglo A and Anglo B, and we would alternate. So one week you'd be learning a bunch of techniques and this and that and this and that, and then the following week you were prepping and cooking stuff for the restaurant. And we would prep, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then serve Thursday and Friday. So the restaurant was only open on Thursdays and Fridays. But we would alternate back and forth, and every like department, like the bakery, pastries, everything like that, they had basically 2 groups. So it would switch
Mm-hmm.
back and forth over the course of 5 months. So the restaurant was running full time, um,
Yeah.
and they would have patrons and people would pay and stuff like that. But from what I understand, is that the allure to it was that the menu was very there wasn't a lot of profit to the menu because it was a school. So I imagine that maybe they didn't charge so much,
Mm-hmm.
and it also encouraged getting people in the doors to eat food from kids who are learning how to cook. And we made pretty high end stuff and pretty amazing stuff. Don't get me wrong, but they weren't
What were
charging.
the kind of meals that you were making?
Oh man, I mean, like black squid risotto. We made all sorts of stuff. The sad thing is that my memory from playing so much hockey and getting so many concussions, it's pretty crappy. So I'm trying to remember, but we had everything on the menu from, like jackrabbit, like wild jackrabbit,
Oh wow.
quail, pigeons, veal, um, abalone, oysters, like
Mm-hmm.
the whole 9 yards. Like anything you could think of, we had it and we cooked it at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So, um, obviously truffles was a popular one, but yeah, loads of crazy things, loads and loads of stuff. So,
Yeah. What was your favorite meal to make?
oh, that's a good question. It's funny because I was in the cuisine department, but one day out of the week, we um, we we got to make pastries. So one day out of the week, every 2 weeks, we would be able to do pastries. And we had a
Mm-hmm.
pastry chef who taught that class, which by the way, his name is Antoine. Which by the way, he started his teaching career as a chef at like a culinary institute in New York, and his first class he ended up having Bobby Flay in his class, which was
Oh
crazy.
no way.
Yeah. So this like really chill, relaxed French chef from like the south of France. And if you know things about France, it's like everyone from the south is really relaxed and easygoing, and then everyone from like Paris and the north is a little bit more tense. Probably has to do
Yeah.
with light, and they like bicker about it, But
That's like West and East Coast in the US.
exactly, exactly. So, but I really liked cooking pastries. And later on, once I left France and came back to the U.S., I actually found myself cooking a lot of pastries and working in a lot of pastry stations at a lot of different restaurants. But there's this one dessert that I just absolutely love, mostly because I love eating it. But the way that you make the dessert, it's also pretty fun, and it's called a
Mhm.
Napoleon. I can't remember if it's called Millefeuille or the Napoleon, but yeah, it's basically phyllo dough that's folded over itself like a million times, and that's a fun thing to actually do when you make it from scratch. Yeah, but it's super good, tastes great. So yeah, pretty hard to beat.
What kind
And
of is it like?
what?
But yeah, like what kind of pastry or what? Um, I guess how would you describe it?
Yeah, well, so are you familiar with like phyllo dough?
Honestly, not really. I'm thinking, as you're talking about this, I'm like, oh man, maybe I should go to cooking school and learn a thing or two.
Right. Um, have you ever had baklava?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so like not the filling of the baklava, but kind of like the dough of it.
Okay.
It's kind of like that,
Okay.
where it's like very airy.
Mm-hmm.
So the technique of making it is you basically get your dough and you roll out your dough into like kind of like a square. And then you like roll out each side of the square. So like it kind of has like a kind of like a point to it. And then
Mm-hmm.
you take a block of butter, and this butter, from what I recall in school, the key thing with this butter is that it has like a little bit less water in it than like normal butter, and it's basically like literally like it's like a square slab of butter, and you put it, flush with the dough, and then you take those corners and you fold it almost like you're folding up like a like an envelope, if you're to like make an envelope or something like that. And that's how the chef
Yeah.
described it. He's like, this is an envelope. You it's a love letter you're sending your lover. I'm like, okay, Antoine. And, very really relaxed dude. Really relaxed. I mean, really relaxed compared to the other chefs we had. I'll tell you that. Um, but then after that, you basically have a square that has the butter in the inside of it, and it's all folded up. And then you roll it out into a long rectangle, and then you fold it into thirds. So you take one end, fold it third way up, take the other end, fold it third way up, and then you rotate it 90 degrees. And then you roll it out into a long rectangle again. And then you do the same folding technique, and then you turn it 90 degrees, and then you roll it out. And every time you fold it and roll it out, it's like a compounding. It's like it like compounds the amount of layers that there is. So after you do that
Yeah.
like 20 times, you've actually created more like, like a dough that has like, 600, 700 layers of like dough, and then butter, dough and butter, dough, butter, dough, butter. And then when you cut it and then, layer it with your fillings and stuff, and you bake it, it rises, and then the butter almost kind of like melts into it slash melts out of it. And so you're
Mm-hmm.
left with all these like hundreds and hundreds of layers of paper thin dough. And that's why it's super airy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's crazy how that works.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds good though.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I don't know if you ever had this when you're in Paris, but macarons or
Uh,
macaroons, those are to die for. And we made those too, and those were a lot of fun, but very, very challenging.
yeah, I bet.
So,
um, dang, they're making me hungry here.
oh yeah.
um, yeah, so you were there for a year. What was it like, living over there and obviously like learning about the cooking culture there and just kind of learning the French life over there?
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot of things. You know, so one, I was living with my grandparents and for like the first 3 months that I got there because it was very hard to find a place to actually live in Paris. Oh, and this will
Hmm.
totally feed into a
Feed into
great story, by the way. Hopefully, viewer discretion advised. Um, but I was living with my grandparents for the first 3 months, which was amazing because I was their only grandson and I was one of two grandchildren. So,
Wow.
and so, my mom had left Paris, or not Paris. She left what a town called Le Vésinet. Le Vésinet is like, you know, I don't know, and it's like an hour west of Paris. It's not really
Okay.
that far. Maybe like 45 minutes on the TGV, which is
Hmm.
it's kind of like a train. It's not like the metro. It's a train that really it serves people more in like in the outskirts and stuff like that, and it's above
Hmm.
ground. Um, but living with my grandparents and just like as far as the food goes, I remember like being a kid and going over there and eating. But then being there as an adult and like spending like an entire year, I like really realized just how important food was and how central it
Hmm.
was to just like everything. Prime example was like every Sunday was to them it was just like a normal Sunday. To me, it seemed like a pretty big deal. But every Sunday, you wouldn't really eat breakfast. It was kind of like a very light breakfast, and you didn't really like eat dinner either, because you had like a lunch. Maybe this is just unique to my family, but the lunch you had was was it was like it was like a 2.5 hour like episode. It was
Hmm.
it was pretty intense. So usually what would happen is like Saturday and Sunday morning, with my grandparents, I would go walk with them to the center of town, so they lived in an apartment, but you go walk like 20 minutes to the center of town. You had your reusable grocery bags and your push carts and all that.
Hmm.
And just you can imagine, there's like a big church or like a yeah, big church, in the middle of in the town, and you had all these almost like farmers markets set up, uh,
Hmm.
encircling the entire church, but very well organized, not like mishmash, like crazy. And if you like, when you walked around Paris, also, if you looked at like the sidewalks and stuff, you would notice that there's like holes in the sidewalks with like metal brackets and things like that. Every Wednesday and every Saturday, um, trucks would show up like the night before, like 12 in the morning, and they would set up all these metal brackets and all these canopies. And then, like soon after, the people that like were leasing like the little spot that they had would show up and then sell their fresh produce. And so, like, I remember it
Huh.
was like clockwork, especially when I was walking home drunk. So I will say, when I was in Paris, I did go out a lot, and I would watch these trucks like roll in, and like four or five guys jump out, and then just drive down the road slowly, setting up the canopies, all pretty premeditated and just like proper design and everything.
Hmm.
And then the people would start showing up, setting up shop, and by the time morning hit, you had these stands where like you go to one lady and all she had was olives, but she had like 50 freaking ceramic jars of all the olives you could ever imagine. They were so good. And then you go to the next one, it'd be vegetables, and the next one it'd be fruits. The next one would be like a bakery or like an extension of a bakery. So they show up with all the bread and all that,
Yeah.
and then the fish people, and like every single little spot was filled, and there's somebody there providing something very unique and decadent at the same time.
Hmm.
But every Sunday, with my grandparents, we would start lunch. I suppose that's what you can call it. with like a little bit of champagne and like maybe some nuts, maybe some olives. And then after you ate that, then we'd go sit down at the actual table. And then we would start with seafood, and it'd be like, maybe some shrimp, and then like these little tiny like popcorn shrimp, except you would just
Hmm.
eat them whole, like the heads and everything, just chow down
Oh
at them.
wow.
Yeah, they're actually pretty good. And you just
Huh.
had to get over the chewiness of like trying to chew through
Yeah,
shrimp shell.
gotta get them
Um,
in.
and then you'd have maybe like oysters or like maybe half a lobster, that was cooked and stuff like that. Langoustine, which was always really good. Langoustine is like a mix between like a shrimp and a lobster. It's like a weird looking. I think it's called langoust in English. I can't remember. And then after the seafood, you would have, like kind of like your I don't know, whatever, your rice, your quinoa, whatever you want to call it, things like that.
Hmm.
And then you would have your meat, so eat meat, so or poultry and things like that. Sometimes we'd have both chicken, you'd have like duck or like gibier, which is like a male chicken that's been neutered, so they're supposed to taste better because they don't, they've got grass on their mind, not ass. How my dad used to say it.
It's a good way to put it.
you know and then you would eat meat, so then like like a roast or this or that or whatever,
Hmm.
and then you would have salad, and then you would have dessert, which was just as much of like an undertaking. Or sorry, before the dessert you would have, after the salad, then you would have cheese. You can't forget the cheese. And then
Hmm.
you would have dessert, and then you would have coffee, and then after that you would have like a shot of like a shot or two of cognac with like a sugar cube. So it
Huh.
was a lot of food,
Yeah,
but it
sounds
would be
like
like
it.
a 3 hour ordeal of like sitting down and eating.
Hmm.
And everything was, my grandparents, I guess, were older, so a lot of the stuff they bought was pre-cooked and stuff like that. But don't get me wrong, it wasn't like a microwave meal. Like they're picking up
Yeah.
from the boutique that all they do is fish, or the place that all they do is poultry or
Hmm.
whatever. So like it was absolutely decadent, and it was so good. And that was what our Sundays looked like. Lots of eating. Um, you know, and if it puts it in perspective as far as like how important food is, like let's talk about cheese. Everyone knows France, for their cheese and stuff. Like in
Hmm.
in the fridge of my grandparents' fridge, there'd be like a designated spot for the cheese tray, or a cheese board. And on that cheese board, there'd be like 20 different cheeses on there,
Oh, geez.
and everything you could ever think of. And they would change, per the season too. So it wasn't like always the same 20 cheeses, but each one was very unique and very special and had a backstory to it and a history. And it's like my grandparents knew everything about everything that they were eating. They knew everything
Hmm.
about like how it came about and where it's made and what's so special about it and what the season
Yeah.
is for it and all that. Not like us Americans here, where we go buy a block of Tillamook pepper jack and call it good.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
It,
know.
it's amazing how different the food culture is, in a place like France or Italy compared to the US.
Oh yeah.
We just we don't appreciate it over here in the US. We focus more on, working and productivity and, eat the meal as fast as you can so you can go back to work kind of thing versus,
Yeah.
it sounds like the food culture over there in France is that, hey, this is an experience. This is the event of the day and we're going to, make it as good as possible.
Oh yeah. Well, and you want to know how I learned a lot about food in France was when I finally got an apartment in Paris and I was living in Paris. And when I went to the grocery store for the first time, um, because growing up in McCall, I would drive my car to the grocery store and stuff like that. My
Yeah.
mom, because I was still in high school, so I wasn't really responsible for myself. And when you go grocery shopping, you kind of like buy everything you need for the week,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe 2 weeks, or it's just a lot of stuff. And
Yeah.
you push it out in this big grocery cart and you throw it in your car in a bunch of plastic bags, and you go home and you put it all away. Well,
Mm-hmm.
when I went to the grocery store for the first time in Paris, I tried to do the same thing, and then I realized I had like a 25-minute walk back to my freaking apartment, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be a undertaking." I'm like, I bought way too many groceries, um, and you just kind of see it. Like everyone, like everything you, all your produce and all the food you get, you're going out consistently. You're getting the most fresh stuff. Things
Mm-hmm.
are only in season. You hardly get anything from out of season. And like even the grocery stores look pretty bare compared to ours, because like grocery stores are just kind of like supplementary to the markets, and a lot of people get their
Mm-hmm.
food from the markets, and it's way better food at the markets.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but like the cheeses are in season, right? So every cheese has its season. The fruits are in season. The vegetables are in seasons. The seafood is in season. The meat is in season. Even the bread is seasonal. You know, it's like everything has its own season. So it's like much more in tuned with like, what you eat and when you eat it. Where I feel like here, the only thing that people are in season with is like barbecuing after Memorial Day,
Yeah.
um, and then a little bit of um, like seafood, because that one's kind of a hard one. You can't really fudge that. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna Dungeness crab is like, they collect it at a certain time of the year, so you kind of just like you have to kind of stick to that. But everything else here, we eat all sorts of stuff out of season, and it probably goes in part with a lot of the GMO food that we create,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't really taste that good,
Yeah.
and it's not appreciated. Because think about it this way,
Mm-hmm.
it's like when you buy things in season, you cook things in season, and you enjoy them in season, they taste better. It's more natural to like what the plant's supposed to be doing, kind of deal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then there's also, it probably goes back. It probably correlates to also like taking the time to really make that dish good, because
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, you know um, asparagus is only around for like the next couple of weeks, so we're gonna make like our best asparagus dishes, and we're gonna really like enjoy it,
Yeah.
because before you know it, it'll be out of season, it's gone, and you're not gonna have asparagus till next year.
Yeah. Uh,
So
yeah.
every week and every month, whatever you're eating is like kind of special, because it's like that's what you eat that time of the year. So it's kind of cool in
Mm-hmm.
that regard.
Yeah. Now, and I'm sure, all of that food tasted so much better. And I'm going to guess you probably felt a lot better eating it as well compared to the US.
I was still a pretty spry 18-year-old, so you
That
know,
helps too.
I could have consumed anything and been fine,
Yeah.
really. Um, but well, prime example is like the baguettes. Like I try to explain this to people who've never been to France, and people who've been to France totally understand. But like a baguette made in France in a French bakery has a very unique taste. I've never come
Hmm.
across a single baguette here that tastes like a French baguette. I've never have had a baguette that's as good as a French baguette, or tastes like one. I
Hmm.
haven't, and I've tried. I've been pretty optimistic. Same thing with the macarons. Those are um, there are very few, like a handful of places in the country that can make them on par with how the French make them. But there's plenty of places that make them that Yes, they taste good, but man, they don't taste like the ones made in France. And I don't know what it is. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if it's the sugar or the wheat or the the flour, whatever it is. There's just something so unique about it that you just can't find it.
Yeah, it's
So
probably all those French students on the top floor getting all the good materials.
yeah, exactly. So, um, but yeah, being in France was a lot of fun. I guess culturally speaking, I kind of Paris was an interesting city. It's kind of a little. It can kind of come off pretty cold. Like the people
Mm-hmm.
aren't very friendly there, and it's just a big city. You're hustling and bustling and trying to get around to places. You're walking everywhere, but I remember like I didn't realize until I started living there just how many freaking tourists visit that city. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the most, if not the most, visited city in the world.
I think it is. I think it is the most. And I remember like
Yeah.
being just wearing my, when I lived there, I kind of started to blend in. I started to buy more French looking clothes, European looking clothes. When I
Hmm.
first was there, I was wearing like my state track hoodie from high school.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm the only person on this entire subway that's wearing a hoodie, you know? um, so I got a pea coat and stuff like that and was kind of blended in. And I remember one time I just like was walking down the street and I had like these two blonde Californian girls. They're like, excusez-moi, um, where is this? And I like take my headphones out. I'm like, are you are you for real right now? And they're like, whoa, your English is really good. I'm like, yeah, I'm American, and you're embarrassing me because you didn't even make an attempt to speak to me in French. And that's one of the things too that I think plays in part with the French being kind of cold. Um,
Hmm.
French culture, from what I understood after living there, and then also from my family and stuff like that, French take a lot of pride in their language, and they take a
Hmm.
lot of pride in anything that's aesthetically pleasing. Uh, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like anything anything that can be labeled as romantic or artistic or beautiful. That's what they like live and die for. It's like the French are known for their food and their lovemaking and their
Yeah.
fashion and their perfume and their art and their
Hmm.
architecture, like everything in their language, which is beautiful. So when you go over there and you don't even try, it really turns people off very fast. And I think that's where there's
Yeah.
a lot of that feeling when you're over there. Like no one wants to speak to you.
Yeah, I'm sure, with, the insane amount of tourists and then, a lot of, probably Americans mostly, not even attempting to, to learn more about the culture or try to understand, and try to fit into the culture. I'm sure that's part of the reason why they are so,
Oh yeah,
standoffish or cold.
yeah. I will tell you though, it was very difficult. I was really hoping to have a French girlfriend. Like that was like on my bucket list. Never got a French girlfriend. I thought
Oh
it'd be
no.
easier than what it actually was. Very heartbroken. It's funny because when I was living in Paris, even though like my French now kind of sucks, but growing up with my mom, my French was pretty good. My accent was pretty good, and I felt like I could blend in fairly well. Um, the majority of the people I ended up spending time with was expats, really,
Hmm.
um, and like two French people, and that's about it.
Huh.
Like my entire social circle was expats. It was very, at least in Paris, it was very hard to make friends that were French. Um, and the few that I made friends with, the only reason I did is because we were in the gates of hell in the restaurant that we were interning at. So there's a little bit of camaraderie right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Huh. Why do you think it was so hard to meet, locals?
I don't know, but how my chef had described it to me, because I did ask him. He said that in at least with the French or in France, and I don't know how true this is. He said, in America, you have lots of friends. You have lots and lots and lots of friends.
Hmm.
But when the time comes and you need those friends for something very important, there's very few that are there for you. He said,
Yeah.
in France, you do not have many friends. In the French don't have, the French culture. You don't really have a lot of friends. Um,
Hmm.
but the ones that you do have, all of them are always there for you. Always. No questions, no doubts. So he told me that once, and I was like,
Interesting.
oh, maybe people are very, very particular with who they decide to be friends with.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I mean, I definitely, I mean, I can speak on the American side of things. I think that's totally true that, we have a lot of friends in quotations. And, when push comes to shove, there's only going to be, one or two that actually show up to help you out.
Yeah, and I don't know what that is. I will say, like, I feel like in America, like, we're very friendly. Like,
Hmm.
Americans, for the most part, and yeah, for the most part, we're pretty friendly and pretty
Yeah.
conversational. But maybe I'm saying that from being from Idaho, because everyone up here is pretty cool, and like you can just chat, like you can make a joke to any person passing by and they'll like engage with you. I
Hmm.
bet like in New York City, I don't know, it's probably not the same. But like in France, yeah, like trying to like interact with a person in the subway who's like 2 inches from your face. Um, it doesn't matter how close they are to you; they still don't want to talk to you.
Yeah. Huh. That's wild.
Yeah,
I've noticed that, having traveled is the Americans are definitely the loud ones. They're the friendly ones. They're, obnoxious and outgoing. And then you see a lot of other cultures that are just very, very closed off, a lot more quiet. They're
hmm
not smiling, not as friendly.
hmm
It's really an interesting kind of cultural difference there. And
Well,
I've always thought, I've always thought it's from, uh, America really hasn't experienced a lot of hardship necessarily,
yeah,
compared to the rest of the world. We haven't had to go through, massive wars on our soil, or, had to go through insanely hard, like, uh, economic struggles
yeah,
necessarily.
yeah. Well, I'll say is that when I was living in Paris, I had two friends amongst all my expat friends, um, and one was from Scotland, and then the other one was from Australia. Oh, and there was another one from New Zealand. Um,
Oh, nice.
and they were all very outgoing and
Yeah,
very friendly. And I was like, oh, you guys are cool. I need to find more Australians to hang out with.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
The Australians are very outgoing as well. I've noticed that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting to see the differences in how, people interact with others around the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, so being in Paris for a year, I mean, you said that you already knew French,
Mhm.
from your mom growing up, correct?
Yes. Yes. I was
Okay.
because as a kid, I didn't want to be like an outsider, and I felt like an outsider.
Mhm.
Everyone knew that I was French, so I got picked on growing up for being French. But
Yeah.
school, it kind of turned into my favor because everyone's like, "Oh, it's cool that you're French." Um, but yeah, I like refused to speak French to my mom, also because she used to be the French teacher in the high school, so like she would correct me. But so I avoided speaking French in front of her, but she would speak French to me, so I understood it very well. But my
Okay.
wasn't quite there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So did that help, when you moved to France? That helped knowing a little bit already.
Oh yeah, it helped tremendously, and it was kind of like when I guess when I was a kid, and like I remember when my mom was telling me that when I went to kindergarten, I was speaking French and English like in the same sentences. uh,
Hmm.
really tripped up the teachers, and so they out of class and stuff like that. And then I also had like a French accent, so they considered that a speech impediment. So they also pulled me out of all my
Really?
class to work on my speech impediment. Yeah.
Oh,
So
wow.
so I think that like deep down inside, laying dormant, I had like all this like ability to speak and understand French very well. And when I moved over there, like the first couple of weeks, I was following along with what people were talking about and stuff like that. But as time went on, like it was like compounding. Like my French started to get so much better. My accent was getting nailed down perfectly, or pretty
Hmm.
close to perfect. Um, and I was getting to the point where I could really understand a lot of people, you know, because you have like French Africans and French Canadians and stuff like that,
Hmm.
like different
Yeah.
French. But yeah, after a while, I remember like the first month, I was trying to speak as much French as I could, and straight up my vocal cords were getting tired. Like I never felt like
Oh. Huh.
speaking, but like speaking nonstop in French, like I was starting to get like a sore throat. And then after a while, it kind of went away. And and so yeah, like 6 months in, my French got pretty good, and it had to, because by the time I started my internship, I was working in a restaurant where the chef spoke French and like a teensy wincy bit of English, like barely. And then the sous chef, he spoke Japanese and a little
Oh
bit.
gosh.
And then the pastry chef was German, and he spoke English and German and a tiny bit of French. And then I spoke French and English pretty well. And then there was another cook who spoke just French and nothing else. And then there was the dishwasher. His name was Yunusu. He's from Mali, Africa. He basically was like literally just working at the restaurant to send money back home. And
Hmm.
Yunusu was the most stubborn person I'd ever met, and he did not want to integrate into anything. So his French sucked, and or maybe it was just because he was illiterate. I don't know. Great guy, and I befriended the crap out of him in the restaurant, which was really awesome because it was funny because he was like really stone cold. Like he never showed like any emotion or anything. I
Hmm.
totally cracked his shell. Uh, Mostly because I was always picking on him and being a little twerp, which is people's hearts, surprisingly. Anyways, yeah, he barely spoke like really anything. So it was a very interesting kitchen to work in where like there was language barriers, but
Hmm.
we managed to figure it all out.
Huh. Yeah. That's I think, being immersed into the culture and into the language is the best way to learn for sure.
Hmm.
I mean, especially when you got, a bunch of people who, don't speak the same language as you, like you have to figure it out.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's gonna be real hard to communicate with them.
yeah,
Um, I just, you know, as we're recording this here, I just got back from Colombia, and it was the same thing. Like, I know a little bit of Spanish, and can speak just, a very little bit and understand a little bit. Um, but, being in Colombia for 2 weeks, um, I felt like I improved leaps and bounds in my Spanish skills just from being there and being forced to, speak it and hear it and try to communicate in that language.
yeah. No, totally. Yeah, I mean, your body just basically adapts, and
Hmm.
when you hear it constantly, when it's on the radio, when it's on the TV, when you hear when people are walking by talking on the phone, like even if you don't pay attention to a single thing they're saying, your ears are picking up everything. Your brain's listening to
Yeah.
everything, and so it's like that immersion is what's needed. And so, like, I haven't been back to France since I went there, just because life has been just too busy. But I really want to go back, and I want to go back for like a month, and I just want to get back to trying to immerse myself in it so I can get back to speaking and everything in between.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like have you noticed that you've maybe lost a little bit
oh, I've
of
lost
the
a lot.
skills?
Well,
Yeah.
because I don't live with my mom anymore, so I don't hear it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I need to. I'm trying to start. Well, I'm not trying. I have made no effort, but I've contemplated starting a French conversation in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which is where I live, because there's a bunch of French speakers up here, and um, just forcing myself to do it would really help as far as like just getting back to it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I know. Some places will have places where there's people that are trying to learn English,
mhm.
and they speak Spanish or something like that, and then they have people that speak English that are trying to learn Spanish, and that's kind of a great way to help both people learn the other language.
Yeah.
Um, so that'd be a cool thing. I would sign up for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's
Yeah.
funny because that's actually what my living arrangement was when I was in Paris. So
Oh, really?
yeah, you're gonna love this story. This is gonna be great for the
Yeah.
podcast
Yeah.
because people will get a very interesting kick out of this.
Okay.
So I spent 3 months looking for a place to live, and it was very hard to find a place to live. And it's um, it's like the price of places and like how small the space you get is just like it just sucks.
Yeah.
And so I spent 3 months looking for a place, and I would go to place to place to place, and I would go into Paris and check out like 3 or 4 places. And the issue for me was like the type of place I was going to live in, and then the budget that I had, and then like the proximity that it was to like my school, which my school was like in the heart of Paris. So
Hmm.
it's pretty hard to find anything that was reasonable. But I tried, and I kept on getting just disappointed with every place that I went to. And finally, towards like the 3 month mark, I was like, shit, I'm going to be living with my grandparents the whole time. Don't be wrong, love my grandparents, but I'm a young 18-year-old. I want to go live in Paris. I want to go experience the wildness
Yeah.
of Paris. And so this ad pops up for a place in Paris, no photos, which is usually a pretty big red flag because if you know that it's a crap hole if there's no photos.
Yeah.
And the value proposition was $400 a month uh, for your own bedroom and your own bathroom and a shared living space, and then the occasional request to practice English. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And my aunt at the time, she's like, well, let's go check it out. And I'm like, okay, I'll go check it out. And so we go to check it out. And the guy specifically did not provide the address of the place at all. He
Huh.
provided a kind of like a public location to meet. So we get
Hmm.
there and meet him there, and he's a pretty well dressed dude, like really really well dressed dude. And I'm like, okay. So we meet him. His name is Anthony Viel, and we start walking with him. And he's like, all right, let's go check out the place. And I'm like, okay. So it's about a 20-minute walk from where we met him, and we show up to like this huge building. This is like in the heart of Paris. We show up to this huge building, and it's a like it's like a 9-story building or something like that, and it's like a business school. And so we like walk
Hmm.
in, we walk into like the main area courtyard, and then we like hang a right, and then we go into this like entrance area, and we take an elevator, and we go all the way to the very top, and then we get to the spot, and then you get out of the elevator. Then you got to walk up these stairs to this door, and you unlock the door. And we walk in, and I wish I had photos to show you, but I kid you not, this was like a multi-million-dollar flat.
Jeez.
Just the most insane thing. Had his own personal gym in there. He
Oh
had like
goodness.
stainless steel everything. He had this giant like patio, like probably like 2,000 square foot patio with palm
Jeez.
trees and water features and like a bar out there and all these lounge couches and canopies and stuff and like a
Good
view of
gosh.
like the Eiffel Tower. And then like the inside had like this glossed over like concrete flooring. It's just all these amazing, crazy things. And I was like, oh my God, this can't be, this is too true. This is too real. And he's like, yeah, so $400 a month, no contract, just all money under the table. And he's like, and I want to speak English with you, like once or twice a week, so I can practice my English. Well, his English is pretty freaking good. I mean, I'll be honest. I was a public school kid and I grew up in Idaho, so I honestly feel like his English was already better than mine. So I was like, whatever, let's do it. And so I ended up moving in, and this guy was just so interesting. I had no idea. It was just, it was like a dream come true at first. Absolute dream come true. I was like, this is crazy. And there was another guy living there whose name was Nafis Hamid. Nafis is a great guy. Ooh, I need to connect you with Nafis.
Yeah.
Nafis basically has not lived in a central place for the last like decade. He's like basically lived
Wow.
like all around the world. And he studies ISIS, the terror
Oh,
group.
really?
Yeah. So I don't really
Jeez.
understand what he does still to this day. But anyways, Nafis is there. He's 28. I'm 18. We're living in the same place. I meet him and all that. I have my own room and bathroom. Nafis has his own room and bathroom, and Anthony has his own room and bathroom. And we're like, this is crazy. And so, anyways, I move in. Everything's great. And as the weeks and the months go by, or I guess weeks, we'll say, as the weeks go by, get to know Anthony. Very interesting guy. He's like in his 40s and he's kind of weird, like very weird. He's got a lot of money, but something about him's just not right. And throughout the time that I was staying there, Nafis and I got pretty close as friends and we hung out a lot. Um, and we couldn't really figure out what he did for work or where he got all his money. And we both kind of like would like ask him slash like not even like ask him directly, but like try to conversate about it and try to like find out like clues and evidence. And he had like this like Vietnamese girlfriend who was like half his age and this and that. Um, Occasionally there would be guys in suits that would show up. And when the guys were supposed to show up, Anthony told us that we were not allowed to be there. We had to leave until they were gone. And we would literally pass them by on the sidewalk and they'd be walking with like suitcases and stuff like that. I don't know.
Jeez.
This guy also owned a Subway sandwich franchise, which I feel was his way of laundering money. But it was just very odd. And so at first Anthony would be like, "Hey, I want to speak English tonight when you're off from school, and practice my English. I've been watching How I Met Your Mother and I had questions about things." I'm like, "Sure. Okay. Easy." And then as time went on, it was becoming weirder and he was like, "Hey, every Sunday we should go walk around Paris and we can speak English and I'll show you all the hidden secrets of Paris because I've lived here my whole life." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." Um and then as time went on, he was like, "We should go out every Friday and Saturday night. because I want to meet American girls, and I want you to help me meet American girls and introduce me to American girls and practice my English." And I'm like, "Okay, sure." And about 4 months in, I was literally spending every waking minute that I had away from school with him. And it was just getting like just over the top. And
Hmm.
I had to confront him, and I was like, "Hey, Anthony, like I really appreciate you living here, but I was like, I got to spend time with my grandparents. I want to spend time doing my own thing." And the day that I told him that, he like snapped, and he, from that point forward, for like 2 months that I was living in this place, he wouldn't even acknowledge my existence. So I'd literally come downstairs,
Jeez.
and he would like be in the room, and it would almost be like I wasn't there. Like I was like a ghost. And it was very odd. And then Nafis was on good terms with him, and they would be talking and stuff like that. And he would be making jokes about like how he used to have girls that would stay in the rooms that we were in, but they only lasted like a month, and then he had to get new girls to move in, and then they kind of just like left, and then we were the next ones, and then we started to notice that like all of our rooms had like no locks on them, and like all the windows had like these like guardrails on like on the outsides of them. Very odd stuff. Basically, we concluded that he was like a human trafficker or something. I don't know. But it was a
Jeez.
very awkward experience. And then one day I woke up to him standing over my bed, and he's like,
Oh God.
yeah. So he totally came into my room while I was sleeping, standing over my bed, and he's like, "You need to move out today. There's people coming to look at your room today." And I was like, "Oh, okay. All right." And that's where I spent. So at that point, I had 3 months left in Paris, and I ended up spending the last 3 months in Paris sharing a mattress with Yunusu, the dishwasher, in the restaurant where he slept. So it was a very wild ride living in Paris. Lots of
Yeah.
fun
Oh my
things that
God.
I did, and a lot of cool things I got to see. Ate a lot, which was great. But absolutely a very interesting time of my life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That was a that was a roller coaster listening to that.
You know,
Um,
and that
wow.
was just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, if you get the chance to interview Nafis, you can ask Nafis about Anthony. It's a very interesting human being.
Yeah,
Very
sounds like it.
interesting situation too that we found ourselves in. So
Well, I'm glad that you're here to tell a story
I know.
about that.
Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't part of the movie Taken. But
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of.
yes. Oh yes.
That's wild. Geez. Well, so I guess to lighten it up a little bit, what were some of the best parts of living in Paris for a year?
Um, you know, um, it was. I think the Paris itself was one of the best things about it.
Hmm.
Um, just like the architecture. Paris was very lucky. Like especially during like World War II, where like you had other cities that were just bombed to smithereens, and
Hmm.
you had the city of Paris that was just untouched. Very very special that happened, and it's such a shame to any of these old historic cities, really anywhere in the world, that have to succumb to war because it destroys so much culture and
Yeah.
and history in those places. And so being able to walk through Paris, I mean, whether it was me on a drunk stroll trying to make my way back to my apartment, or if it was during my lunch breaks from the restaurant, or if it was the creepy Sundays that I would spend with Anthony. Like I I when I lived in Paris, that's where I was. I was in Paris. I hardly
Mhm.
traveled outside of Paris. And so I got to know every street, every building, like every nook and cranny of that entire city. And it was so cool. I mean, there's just so much. And I think it was really cool to be able to like live in such a big city and in the
Mhm.
span of a year, like have explored every square inch of it and just, admire the architecture, um, the design, the court the quirks of it, and
Mhm.
everything in between and whatnot. So that was an awesome part. um just being around, for an Idaho boy, being around just so many people from different parts of the world. And even like my class that I was in when I was in cooking school, it's like I had a student from Taiwan, there was a student from Brazil and Portugal, and Spain and Venezuela and Peru, Canada, Belgium, Kenya. Like
Wow.
my
All over.
classmates was just so diverse. It was so cool. Um, and so it was just really cool to just kind of get to know all those people and stuff like that. And then all the expats that I befriended, and then kind of befriending a bunch of other Americans, and like almost kind of like forming like a, a fraternity, or like a camaraderie of like taking on this big city as a group,
Mhm.
and being able to you know partake in some funny things, like for example Cinco de Mayo. That rolled around, and all of us Americans were like, well, gee dang it, we need to go find some
Yeah.
Mexican food. Turns out there's no Mexican food in Paris. Makes sense. Especially because it's not really a big holiday that France likes to celebrate, because that was, I do believe that's when Mexico gained their independence from, or beat France. So, um, you know, things like that, just the fun of that. And I'd say probably the last thing that was a big one, probably the biggest one, is just being able to spend time with my family from France that lived there, and being
Yeah.
involved with them all the time. And
Mhm.
um, you know, all that. Being able to spend time with my grandparents. I mean, they're no longer here with us, and but when I was over there, I remember setting up my GoPro and um, basically interviewing them and asking them questions about the war. Because they
Oh
both
wow.
were in the war, and they were both in the French Resistance. Um, and
Wow.
so getting to hear stories of trying to evade Nazis, and sabotaging their trucks, and smuggling food under their noses. And Grandpa was captured, and was almost executed
Oh
until he
jeez.
was able to escape his situation. So just being able to hear those stories, and being around my grandparents, who were from a completely different culture than U.S. culture. And sure, I'd spent time with them as a
Mhm.
kid and whatnot, but when you're in there day in day out, you hear about all the little things that like we hear about here in America, and all the little things that we talk about that pertains to our culture and our history and our background, that you really can't uh, appreciate or understand unless you're uh, involved in it all the time.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Man, I'm sure that was amazing just to sit down and hear what your grandparents had to say about their experiences, especially through, through the war and all of that.
Oh yeah.
Being right there in the thick of it.
Amazing and terrifying and saddening all at the same time.
Yeah,
I mean, just the intensity of what happened with Nazi Germany occupying France.
yeah.
So,
Wow. Huh. That's
mhm.
amazing. Do you still have those recordings saved somewhere?
I do kind of. Bit of a problem though. They're saved on my MacBook, but my MacBook kind of like fried itself.
Oh no.
Mostly the battery. The battery stopped working, and like the battery has like expanded like a loaf of bread. So like all
Oh
the
no.
metal of my MacBook is like bent out, like it's bulging. But I still have it because I want to find a very brave geek who is willing to open that thing up and pull out the hard drive and extract all the photos, all the videos, and everything I have. Basically, everything that I have from
Mhm.
Paris is sitting inside that computer. And
Oh wow.
I just haven't spent the time to find somebody who's willing to. I haven't spent the time or the money to find somebody who's willing to like actually like dissect that computer and try to pull it out. But
Hmm.
it's definitely worth it. So at some point,
Yeah, yeah, sounds like it.
yes.
Um, well, dang. Well, yeah, I'm curious. What were some of your big takeaways, or what was it like, you know, coming back from Paris after a year? What kind of takeaways did you have from that year abroad?
Yeah, well, I mean, it had a lot of takeaways, and it was kind of odd because as soon as I came back from Paris, I had like a month and a half in McCall, and then I was going straight to U of I.
Hmm.
And then I joined a fraternity, which was a blast. But my first year, I definitely felt out of place. It was actually a very hard transition for me to make because I felt like I matured quite a bit living in France.
Hmm.
And considering that like my friend group and their average age of the people that I was hanging out with in Paris were like in their mid 20s or later 20s, and I was 18. And then when I came back to Idaho and went to U of I and went to a fraternity, um, I was like surrounded by 18-year-olds,
Yeah.
and I felt very out of place because I was like, I picked up all these like tendencies, like the way that I was dressing, how I was acting, like like coming back and like listening to like rap and stuff, and like getting just shit faced drunk like that. Like I don't know, it was just very awkward. Like I
Hmm.
just felt so out of place. Um, Again, probably coming back from just like feeling like I had matured a whole lot more and become a little bit more
Yeah.
cultured. And it was kind of like I'm trying to say this nicely. All of the people that I was in my fraternity were phenomenal men, and they've all gone on to do great things. But just in the heat of just good old college, it felt like I devolved a little bit
Yeah.
um, and whatnot. So the other crazy thing is going from not driving for an entire year to getting back into my car for the first time
Mm.
after a year. That was a trip. So was seeing all the open vastness of everything when I came back
Yeah.
to Idaho after having lived in a concrete jungle for like a
Yeah.
straight year. It was so weird to be like, whoa, that's an open field. I haven't seen one of those in like a year, or like a
Yeah.
pine tree forest. Haven't seen that in a year. Or, man, this road's pretty wide. This is nuts.
Yeah, I know it's always crazy going. I mean, even going to like a place like New York, but especially in Europe where everything's so much older and smaller, and
Yeah.
built on top of each other.
Yeah.
It's weird coming back and have everything be spread out, and you have to have a car to get anywhere.
Oh yeah.
That's wild.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I'm curious though with the uh, coming back and feeling more mature. I've always thought that as Americans, as they're graduating high school, that maybe not for a year, but at least for a few weeks, go they have to go abroad before entering college. I think that would be a good, if there's one kind of rule to implement, I think that'd be an interesting rule because I think people would come in to college with so much more maturity, like you said, or so much more appreciation for, things that we have here, um, and maybe get more out of their college experience.
Oh,
That's just my opinion.
oh yeah, absolutely. If at all anything, just being in another country provides you perspective,
Hmm.
or it teaches you
For sure.
to see things differently,
Yeah.
which is probably not much of a skill that we have in this day and age,
Yeah.
especially if our school system. I mean, that's not really a necessity of how the standardized schooling works. you know, you
Hmm.
go to school and you're taught information. You're not taught to critically think. You're not taught to question things,
Hmm.
and you're not taught necessarily perspectives. You're taught some algebra, some calculus. You know, maybe like an occasional like Spanish 101,
Yeah.
and that's about it.
Yep.
Oh, and some
Yep.
geography,
Yeah. There you go.
which none of us remember.
Yeah. No one even knows where France is.
I know, right? I wish the same could be said about Idaho. It would be great if no one knew where that was.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think a lot more people are starting to discover it now.
I know.
Um, yeah, well, I guess any other last pieces of advice for, maybe someone who's looking to go abroad for a year for a cooking school or something like that. Or just kind of general advice for people traveling.
Um, hmm, that's a great question. I don't know. I think everyone's going to have their own experience doing it, their own way that they're going to experience it.
Hmm.
um,
I guess any more fun stories or interesting stories that you want to share too?
you know, I don't really. I mean, it was all fun. There was too many stories, too many close encounters and things like that, and fun things. But no, I think you know, it's just like it was all a blast, and I made the most of it. I mean, every single day, I was I was I was doing something. Like
Hmm.
I was not. There was not. I mean, man, I was out all the time, exploring everything. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. Just find some good people that you can trust and rely on when you're traveling, and you know, and try to conquer whatever it is you're trying to conquer. Having Nafis as my good friend when we were there, and still a great friend. Him and I ended up doing so much together. We did so many things that we probably wouldn't have done had we not been kind of like partnered up kind of deal, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and and two, it's like when you're traveling, it's nice to find you know a few of those people that you can lean on. Because when you go to somewhere completely new and you don't know anyone and so on, so on, so on, it can sometimes seem a little overwhelming,
Hmm.
and you're afraid to go do things when like you're all alone. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Nafis helped me a lot, in the sense of like just hanging out with him really allowed me to explore a lot more of Paris, because if it was just me, I would have probably been a little bit more timid to go out and explore and push the envelope. So and whatnot.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I think that's good. I've done a lot of solo traveling. I've done a fair amount of traveling with others, and I definitely can attest to that. Especially in some place, vastly different culture. Like I think of like Southeast Asia, where I was by myself.
Oh
It
yeah.
was a little bit more nerve-wracking to go do something that I wanted to do because I couldn't speak the language. I wasn't sure, and I didn't have anyone there with me to you know feel protected or feel safer with. But then the times when I have had other people there, feel a lot more comfortable, like you said, pushing the envelope a little bit maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, I think it's always good to meet people, and it's fun to meet people too when you are traveling who are maybe looking at similar things or have similar interests as you.
Oh yeah.
um I mean, I've met so many great people from around the world in other places, and it's fun to not only experience whatever we're experiencing with someone else, but also to hear their perspective on it. Maybe they're coming from a different culture, different background, and they experience whatever it is differently than I experience it as an American.
Oh yeah.
So
No,
yeah.
100%. I agree.
Yeah, well, cool. Well, I guess any last things that you want to touch on before we wrap it up here?
Um. mm, no, no. I think that's it. I think that's it.
Okay.
If I could pop open that Mac computer and I could look through every photo and video, probably bring back a lot of good memories, and I could totally do a part two of just wild stories.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. You'll have to let me know when you get that done, and we'll have to do a part two to this.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Adrian, I know I'm definitely inspired to go take a cooking class in France. I'm
Yeah, you
like,
should.
man, it'd be fun to go spend a year in Paris and learn how to cook really well and all of that. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just know you're gonna you make sure you got tough skin, because
Yeah.
those chefs do not mess around at all, one bit.
Yeah, I'm sure it's pretty intense.
It is. It is
Um,
life. It,
yeah, yeah,
you know.
that's funny. Well, cool. Well, Adrian, thanks for taking the time to chat about your experiences today. I know I really enjoyed hearing them and hearing some of the crazy stories that you had along the way. And I'll definitely look forward to that part too.
Awesome, Kyle. Well, I appreciate it, and it was good chatting with you, man.
Yep, yep, you too. I will look forward to seeing you somewhere around the world soon.
Alrighty, sounds good.
Yep. All right. Bye, everyone. Hey everybody, Kyle here. If you enjoyed today's show and want more, you can always listen to other episodes on Spotify or Anchor. The links are in the description below. If you want to see travel pictures from today's guest and other guests, as well as my own travel photos, you can see them on Instagram. The page is called Our Travel Experiences Podcast. If you want to share your own travel pictures on the page and or share your travel experiences on the podcast, you can message me on that Instagram page or email me at ourtravelexperiences@outlook.com. I would love to hear about your travel experiences and see all the beautiful pictures that you've taken. Thanks again for listening, everyone, and I look forward to sharing the world with you again soon.